call upon people and to understand a lot of communication isn't verbal, so it's easier for somebody physically present to chair the meeting. Any further speakers before I put the motion? I'll put the motion. All in favour? Any opposed? That looks unanimous. That's carried.
Thank you, Mayor George. All right, so we'll begin with the opening prayer. Let us pray together, each of us according to our individual beliefs. Grant to this council wisdom, understanding and sincerity of purpose for the good governance of the community. So ordinary item 2 is apologies and leave of absence. We have a leave of absence from Councillor Phil Truscott, which we'll arrive to later in the meeting. And then we've noted Councillor Mayor George Seymour's attendance via Microsoft Teams, and Councillor Michelle Govers should be attending via Teams shortly also. Next is item number 3, disclosures of interest. Does anyone have any disclosures of interest? Councillor Byrne?
Yes, I'd like to declare just a declarable disclosure, maybe a possible conflict of interest with ordinary, with the item 16.1.2. I have some relationships with some of the people that tendered, but I don't believe that will be an issue
16.2
in the supplementary agenda.
So
You rang
I'll
the
just check,
people tender.
I'll move a motion. So you're wishing to stay and participate? Yeah.
That would be correct, yeah.
So I'll move a motion that Councillor Michelle Byrne is able to participate in the discussion and vote on the matter, including all subsequent discussions and decisions about the matter. Point 2, the reasons Councillor Michelle Byrne is able to participate in the discussion and vote on the matter are as follows. A, Councillor Michelle Byrne has informed the meeting of a declarable conflict of interest in the matter in accordance with section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act 2009 Queensland LGA. B, councillors present and able to vote on this matter accept the following. 1, the facts as outlined in the disclosure and representations made by Councillor Michelle Byrne. 2, the declarable conflict of interest for Councillor Michelle Byrne in the matter is not considered to be significant enough to require Councillor Michelle Byrne to leave the meeting. And 3, that it is appropriate for Councillor Michelle Byrne to remain in the meeting and participate in the decision. Is there a seconder for that? I think Councillor Farage was first. And then, so you... Oh, sorry.
Well, I just didn't get all the details. What is the nature of the relationship?
Councillor Byrne?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Basically, we're good friends, but if you have a read of who has actually been awarded the tender, it won't be an issue.
So the person that you know is not the successful
not a successful
applicant.
tender, no.
Can we just get the CEO's advice on that? The acting CEO's, is that relevant, whether or not they're the recommended tenderer?
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't believe it is. I might just double check with Director Parsons. I suspect it may be a conflict that would it would be advisable for you to not vote on the matter, but I'll just confirm that with Director Parsons.
Yeah. Thanks, Director Carline, and through the chair. Yeah, the conflict arises as a result of your relationship, with the tenderer. Notwithstanding council's decision on it, because at this point, all you bear witness to is the officer's recommendation, not the decision of council. So if you were to remain and participate, and you do have a relationship, or they're considered a close associate, then that would give rise to a conflict, Councillor Byrne, and that certainly would not be in your interest to participate if that being the case. So certainly my advice would be that you declare that conflict and leave the room when that matter's being discussed.
So you'll take it as a conflict of interest and you will leave the room then at that time?
Happy to leave the room, yeah.
Okay.
If that's...
Councillor Chapman?
I know that Councillor Burns is leaving the room here, but just a question I ask, is her friend not getting the tender anyway? Through
you, Mr Deputy Mayor, that decision hasn't been made by council, so if Councillor Byrne was to stay in the room, she could potentially influence the council's decision,
Great, okay.
regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, question answered, thank you.
Councillor Sanderson?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you, so I'm very similar to Councillor Byrne. I know one of the proponents as well that were in there. They're not successful, but I will raise declarable conflict, and I'll also remove myself from the room. Yep.
Okie doke. So the previous motion that I read, we don't need that, and Councillors Byrne and Sanderson will leave the room at item 16.1.2. Is there any other conflicts of interest? No? If anything comes up during the meeting, feel free to bring it up at that time. Any mayoral minutes? No mayoral minutes. Next is item 5.1, ordinary meeting number 7/24, 24th of July 2024. Is there a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Farage. And as the seconder, Councillor Byrne. Is there any questions on this item? No? I'll move that item. All in favour? That is unanimous. Next is item 6.1, the Open Resolutions Register, August 2024, pages 22 to 42. Is anyone wishing to move that item? Councillor Chapman, and seconded Councillor Farage. And is there any questions on that item? No. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Next is item 7.1, the community presentations. I'll pass over to the acting CEO.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. This morning we had two members of the public present during community presentations to address the council. Firstly, we had Graham Wode, who spoke about flooding and other issues, including disaster education for children on the Fraser coast. And then we had Roland Rouse, who spoke about the clearing of native vegetation on blocks within Glenwood, and in particular the burning of cleared vegetation. And they were our two presentations this morning.
Thank you, Mr Acting CEO. Do we have a mover for that? Councillor Farage, and a seconder, Councillor Wheeland. And any speakers on that? No, I'll move that item. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Next is, there are no deputations, so next is 9.1, the receipt of petitions. Does anyone have any petitions? No, I have a petition here. This is a petition from the principal petitioner is Katie Diane Selby Brown. There are 62 signatures. This is requesting a zebra crossing at the Maryborough Special School. So I'll be moving that the petition be received and referred to a committee or officer for consideration and a report to council. Seconded by Councillor Sanderson. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. Next is item 10.1 under committees reports, the Environment and Sustainability Advisory Committee meeting minutes, 18th of June 2024, pages 43 to 69. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor O'Keefe, seconded Councillor Farage. Is there any questions on this item? No? I'll move that item. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. And I think we'll just note that Councillor Michelle Govers, are you there, Councillor Govers?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Are you able to turn your camera on at all? There we are. So
I am. Good morning.
Good morning. Just so we
Apologies.
can see you for when you raise your hand to vote.
Thank you.
The next item is 10.2, the Mary to Bay Rail Trail Advisory Committee meeting minutes, 27 June 2024, pages 70 to 143. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Cosgrove. Is there a seconder? Councillor Farage. Is there any questions on this item? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Next item is 10.3, the Fraser Coast Events Advisory Committee meeting minutes, 30th of January 2024, pages 144 to 148. Is there a mover on this item? Councillor Farage. Is there a seconder? Councillor Cosgrove. Is there any questions on this item? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Next is item 10.4, the Fraser Coast Events Advisory Committee meeting minutes, 1st of March 2024, pages 149 to 152. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Cosgrove, seconded Councillor Byrne. Is there any questions on this item? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Next is item 10.5, Fraser Coast Events Advisory Committee meeting minutes, 29th of May 2024, page 153 to 161. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Whelan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Cosgrove. Any questions on this? Councillor Cosgrove.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just wondering if in future, I don't know how often this occurs, but whether these could have been combined into one motion and we just accept the minutes of 3 different meetings, but for the same committee all at once?
Through the acting CEO.
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. We can definitely take account of that suggestion and do it. The other thing I'd say is ideally I'd like officers to get the minutes completed quicker so that we're not having multiples at the same time. So we'll speak to staff about that as well.
Fair enough. Councillor Chapman.
Mr Chair, I've lost my screen for a moment. Could I get
Okay.
the IT to have a look at it, please,
All right,
for a second?
we'll just check.
Did hard copy while
Yeah, we can keep going.
Are you right to still vote presently with the current items, or?
Yeah, no, you're right to go.
So this is the Fraser Coast Events Advisory Committee meeting minutes. So this was moved by Councillor Whelan, seconded by Councillor Cosgrove. If there's no other questions or statements, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Chapman, are you on that as well? Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, so the next item is 10.6, informal meetings, record of matters discussed. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Byrne, seconded Councillor Farage. Is there any questions on this item? No. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Next is Officers' Reports, Office of the CEO, item 11.1.1, which is Councillor Leave of Absence for Councillor Phil Truscott. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Sanderson, and seconded Councillor Farage. I don't imagine there's any questions, but we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Next is 11.2.1, contributions to rural fire service and life flight. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Farage. Is there a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Councillor O'Keefe's departing. Is there any questions or speakers to this item? No? All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? I think that's everyone. Yes, that's unanimous. Okay, next is 11.2.2, the amended councillor attendance policy on pages 186 to 193. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Cosgrove. And is there a seconder? Councillor Chapman. Is there any questions or speakers on this item? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Next is item 11.2.3, CTDC 021 23/24, sale of 7 to 19 Hilliard Street, Pyalba. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Cosgrove.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the alternate motion that's listed on the paper for councillors.
Okay, no worries. So everyone has a copy of this in front of them. I'm not sure if Mayor Seymour and Councillor Govers.
I can clarify verbally. Essentially, this is the officer's recommendation. However, with the insertion of an extra, I guess, line in point 2 that adds that any negotiation approval or entering into contracts on behalf of the Fraser Coast Regional Council by the CEO will be subject to council being provided a report confirming the details of the final proposed scope of the development before a contract is signed.
I'll just make sure for Mayor Seymour and Councillor Groves online that you're aware or you understand what Councillor Cosgrove's put forward, just to make sure. Oh, I can't hear you, sorry George.
I'm sorry, yeah, I was just saying I've got it on the run. I've got this motion on the run sheet.
Okay, all right. Sorry, Councillor Sanderson, did you have a question or?
Yes, Mr Chair, to colleague Cosgrove.
Okay, yep.
Thank you. So is Councillor Cosgrove able to please explain why he's proposed that, please?
Do we need to get a seconder first, Mr Chair, before I do that, or?
I don't think we have to get a seconder, but if someone would like to second it, they are welcome to. Councillor Whelan, yep. So that's moved by Councillor Cosgrove, second by Councillor Whelan. Did you wish to address it in, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'll just speak to the motion and then happy to take further questions if that's.
Yes,
so essentially, we had questions last week in the agenda forum about this item, and I'm concerned that if we pass the officer's recommendation as written, this may be essentially the only bite of the cherry that we get on this development. It's possible that the development is code accessible, and I think that we really want to make sure that we're getting this right. If we enter into a contract of sale, I personally believe that the form of this development is where we want to go for the Payalba CBD. It fits in with what we're trying to achieve with placemaking in the Payalba CBD. However, there's still parts of the function, perhaps with the over 50s aspect, that could be potentially negotiated, perhaps not. And councillors need to be clear what the final function of the building is so that they can make up their own minds and decide whether they're happy to support essentially the proposal going forward. So I don't believe that what we're presented with and the information we have is sufficient enough for us to say, you know, yep, take it from here, CEO. I believe we have a responsibility as the elected body to make sure that we're putting the elected, the electorate's will onto this project and making sure that the proposal can get a little bit more meat on the bones, get an in-principle agreement negotiated by the CEO, and then we can make up our minds. I think it's too early at this stage for us to be giving this one tick and then that's it from the elected body. So what this will allow is for it to come back to council before contracts are entered into, and we can perhaps, we may not have there won't be a DA, I understand, but perhaps a little bit more solidity than I believe there is at the moment. So that's the reason for my amended motion, and yeah, happy to answer any other questions if that doesn't clarify.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Is there any other questions to the item or speakers on the item? Question or speaking And are you speaking for or against? For.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Through the Chair, I agree with my colleague Councillor Cosgrove's motion, and I'd like to support it. I think we owe it to the community to make sure that we're making good choices and choices that are informed, and that to understand that today's motion just looks at the sale. What's been put out into the community thus far is an already finished product, but I think as the elected body we need to make sure that we are ensuring that the finished product of what ends up on the ground is what the community needs and what the community wants, what falls well under our Harvey Bay City master plan, what is futuristic thinking and looks towards the future of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farage. Are there any other speakers or questions on this item? Councillor Chapman, is speaking or question?
No, I'm actually asking, through the Chair, I'm asking the mover of the motion that the last dot point is a friendly motion. The development, it says there that development will be completed in a reasonable time frame. I'd like to change the wording of that as in a friendly motion, that the development design to be completed within 12 months and the construction to be completed in a reasonable time frame. I'm looking at what I'm actually asking for is it's to lock it in a little bit that the design is actually worked on, and it brings it forward, and if within 12 months, if nothing happens within, it comes back to the table and we can look at it again.
Councillor Cosgrove, do you have any thoughts on that? Would you like to accept that as a friendly amendment? Or?
I won't accept that, Mr Chair. Sorry, Councillor Chapman. But I feel like we want to put the least amount of restrictive conditions in this motion to allow the CEO to freely negotiate. We, often make our thoughts on matters pretty clear. I think it's pretty clear to the administration that we want to see this happen as quickly as possible. We want to see progress in the Pialba CBD, but putting a specific limiting dot point such as that, when it could be 13 months, you don't want it to fall over for that reason. So I won't accept that as a friendly amendment, Mr Chair, for those reasons.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. And also too, I note that because in the body of point 2, where it says that negotiations will have regard to that as a following principle, so I don't think it would tie them to that anyway, even if it were. So, Councillor Chapman, are you still wishing to pursue that as an amendment?
No, I'm happy.
Okay. Are there any other questions or speakers on the item? Councillor Sanderson, are you speaking or question?
Question, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Yeah.
Through you to the CEO, acting CEO, how quick will this report come back to council? And secondly, will the contract, or once that's done, come back to a whole council, or will it be done through a different channel?
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sanderson. In terms of how quick, we will do it as quick as we can, but there's two parties to the negotiations, so it's hard to be definitive about that. As soon as assuming Council makes a decision today, we'll be seeking to enter those negotiations almost immediately. And in terms of the second part of that question, how quick will it come back to the full council? Based on the motion that's been moved, we would bring that the proposed contract, back to the full council.
Are there any other questions or speakers on the item? Councillor O'Keefe, are you speaking or question?
Yeah. Speaking for.
Speaking for? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I think it's really important that being that the development contributes to achieving the vision of the City Heart Master Plan, that this requires a higher level of oversight. So I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Are there any other speakers or questions? Councillor Chapman?
Through the Chair and Councillors, I'm also speaking for this motion. I was on the site yesterday of the new hub building that's being built, and I was talking to workers on the site, and we've actually got professional builders that are actually professional at this high-rise work, and they're so pleased to know that the growth of what's happening in Hervey Bay. One of these workers, one of the supervisors there, has actually moved his family from Melbourne. He is a specialist in high-rise building in Melbourne, and he had the choice of going to Brisbane, Sunshine Coast, and he's decided to come to Hervey Bay, and he's decided that he's looking at this council, how productive they are with development, and he's got other friends that were looking at moving to this area. Now, he is building a new home. He's got a wife with 2 children, and he's looking at settling, plus he said there's other people looking at coming to this region. So I think this is just one of the pieces in the puzzle, what's happening within our region, and I think this will be a good fit with what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any other speakers or questions? Mayor Seymour?
Yeah, can I just a question to the acting CEO? Can you talk a bit about the node this is in and what the planning scheme envisages for the height, the maximum height for a building on this site?
Yeah, through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr Mayor, for the question. So the acceptable outcome in the city centre structure plan area, which this includes, is 26 metres. So it is, I think, important for council, but also the community to understand as well that the proposal, even when it's above that 26 metres, you know, things like multiple residential, short-term accommodation, health and wellness, medical businesses, food and drink, function facilities, bars, clubs, nightclubs and business premises are all code accessible. And although we're not considering a development application, we're considering a tender. When you look at the proposal that's put forward, it is pretty much confined to those uses which are code accessible, despite the fact that it's significantly higher than the 26 metres, which is you know, envisaged by the planning scheme as an acceptable outcome within this area.
So at the time of the planning scheme work, a specific decision was made that this area would be outside of the 20 metre height and the 26 metre. So that it was taken in quite knowledge on what was envisaged and what would be appropriate here at 26 metres. Can you talk about what the height of the larger of these buildings that's being looked at here is?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, I appreciate the question. In terms of the exact height, it's hard to be definitive because I can say that the proposal is for a 10-storey hotel and a 16-storey residential building, which would be 3 to 4 times at least sorry, 3 times probably, 2.5, 3 times. So significantly above the 26 metres, noting we don't have a development application. I don't know whether they're 2.1 metre floor plates, 2.4s, 2.7s, you know, and a 2.1 to a 2.7 over 10 storeys can be 6 metres in difference in height. So to be particularly definitive, it's very hard without, you know, a development application, but it is significantly above the 26 metres, which is envisaged as the acceptable outcome in the scheme.
And in your opinion at the time, I know you weren't here at the time of the planning scheme, why do you think the council set aside this area as 26 metres, the acceptable outcome?
Yeah, through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Mr Mayor. It's hard to be too definitive because I never like to put myself in other people's minds, but you know, it is clear from the documentation that it was a very deliberate decision, you know, from the council at that time to, you know, try and place restrictions on height as well as bulk and scale and a whole range of other things as well. You know, there's lots of regulatory mechanisms in the scheme. So I'm positive, you know, obviously all of these decisions are deliberate. But whether, you know, individual councillors, what their, you know, reasons for those things, I'm not entirely sure. But it's very clear that, you know, the council at the time thought, you know, 6 to 8 stories was kind of where we should be maxing out.
And so when they said 26 metres in this area, what values do you think the council was seeking to preserve? I'm only asking you because you're in charge of the department that assesses this. So just as almost academic, I'm interested in how you look at that, because a very deliberate decision was made by the council to limit most of the esplanade to 20 metres as an acceptable outcome in height, and this area and specifically in 26 metres. So that decision was made. That's what we went out to community consultation on 13 years ago or 14 years ago. And I mean, there was a long lead up to, I think when the planning scheme is about 10 years old, isn't it? But in terms of the lead up to it, the community consultation, what do you think the community and the council was trying to preserve in limiting a height on this site to 26 metres?
Well, again, through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, again, not to avoid the question, but I think these matters are complex, and I never think it's one thing, or that, you know, people are one-dimensional and you know, just have a specific view. So I suspect some people it would have been about, you know, view sheds and environmental issues. Others may have had concerns about parking and density and overdevelopment. You know, so I think there would have been lots of different issues that people would have potentially been concerned about. The other part, you know, and I think that, you know, something that the planning profession we haven't done a great job on is, you know, explaining to the community about how planning schemes work, because the council didn't adopt a planning scheme that said you can't go above 26 metres. The council adopted a planning scheme that said there's an acceptable outcome of 26 metres, and if you have something that is above that height or breaches other provisions in terms of bulk or scale or setbacks or things like that, that there is a secondary, you know, more involved approval process.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And that's why I'm wondering if you are going to go over that, what you understand the values of setting that number at. Because if you are going to disregard the 26 metres, or if you think there are other values or aspects that can trump it in a way or diminish it, I'm just interested in what you view the value of keeping a building at 26 metres and below is.
In terms of this proposal, you know, unlike the proposal last month, this is a code assessment, and that's why I've deliberately made that point, that all of those uses are code assessable. So the assessment, assuming that we get to a point, you know, where this motion has moved today is passed, and then assuming there's a negotiation process, and assuming that comes back to council and we get a contract, assuming beyond that there's a development application that comes through, the assessment of that will be bounded by the codes. Unlike the you know, debate that we had, or that the council had last month, where it was an impact assessable application which allowed a much broader you know, consideration of the strategic framework and the matters in that. This assessment will need to be an actual tighter assessment, because it will be a code assessment based on the city centre you know, structure plan area, and you know, the things that it says in there in terms of, you know, the development response to the local context with regard to height, views, overshadowing, pedestrian movement, privacy, high quality of architecture, landscape design, contribution to the overall image and quality of the city centre, pedestrian networks and streetscape enhancements, street relationships, activation of streets, indoor-outdoor visual relationships, traffic and car parking, sustainability being climate responsive, energy efficiency, walking, cycling, things like that. So the assessment will need to take account of all of those things, but it's hard to envisage, given, you know, before a DA is even considered or lodged, there's 3 or 4 other processes before we get to a point where we would have something to consider.
Any further questions or speakers on this item? No? All right, so I'll put the motion forward that was moved by Councillor Cosgrove, seconded by Councillor Whelan. All those in favour? All those against? So it's carried 9-1. Okay, the next item is 11.2.4, councillor meeting attendance for September 2024, page 229. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Farage. Is there a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Does anyone have any questions? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Next is under Strategy, Community and Development, item 11.3.1, Regional Arts Development Fund 2024/25 program. Mover for this, Councillor Farage. Seconder for this item, Councillor O'Keefe. Are there any speakers on this one? Councillor Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Chair of the Regional Arts Development Fund, I would like to thank the outgoing members of the committee, which are Nikki Fernandez, Paul Dams, Gillian Thompson and Suzanne Bushell. Thank you to our continuing members, Cherie Trelaw and Kim Walker, who will complete their second year on the committee, and congratulations to the incoming members, Yuan Butler, Greg Balderow, Leslie Reid and Hannah Stanton. And of course, I'd also like to thank all of the council staff members that are involved in this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farage. Are there any other speakers or questions on this item? No? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Next is item 11.3.2, Guidelines and Procedure, Mayor's Community Benefit Fund Program Final Round, page 253. Are there any is there a mover for this item? Councillor Whelan. Is there a seconder? Councillor Farage. Are there any speakers or questions to this item? No? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Next is Infrastructure Services, item 11.4.1, the naming of a water body at Eli Waters, page 264. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Cosgrove. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sanderson. Does anyone wish to speak or question on this item? That's good. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Next is item 11.5.1, the Wide Bay Burnett Regional Waste and Resource Recovery Plan Steering Group Representative, page 272 to 455. So if required, we can move a procedural motion to call for nominations. Or does anyone wish to nominate someone? Councillor O'Keefe? I will nominate for that role. Councillor O'Keefe, you're nominating yourself for that role. Is there anyone else that wishes to nominate? No? Looks like it. Well done, Councillor O'Keefe. Okay. So we can move the officer's recommendation, which includes in point 2, endorses Councillor Zane O'Keefe to represent Fraser Coast Regional Council on the Wide Bay Burnett Resource Recovery Steering Group. And so is there a move for that? Councillor Sanderson. Seconder, Councillor Cosgrove. Does anyone wish to speak or question on the item? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Next is item 11.5.2, the Water and Waste Services Business Plan 2024 to 28, page 456 to 463. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Farage. Is there a seconder? Councillor O'Keefe. Does anyone wish to speak or question? Councillor Farage.
Just a comment, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to thank Director Vanna and his staff for their hard work in getting this done and hopefully moving our region forward with water.
Fantastic. Thank you, Director Vanna. Thank you, Councillor Farage. Is there any other speakers or questions? No? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Next is item 12, the matters and motions of which due notice has been given. Item 12.1 is request for a report that considers reducing the speed limit along the Harvey Bay Esplanade on page 464. This is moved by Councillor Zane O'Keefe. I'm happy to second that one. And is there, Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. It's Road Safety Week this week, and I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage everyone in our community to drive so others survive. Councillors, road safety is our concern and everyone's responsibility. We build better, safer communities together. It is incumbent on us as leaders to ensure that we are doing everything we can to reduce the chances of road trauma happening in our community, particularly in our built-up, highly pedestrianised areas. We need to provide for safer streets. We need to reduce the speed along the Esplanade to improve livability. We need to improve walkability by preferencing people over vehicles. That's why I'm calling for a speed limit review of the Harvey Bay Esplanade's activity centres. Councillors, research has shown that the speed of a vehicle and the probability of fatal injury for a vulnerable road user, that is a pedestrian or cyclist, have a direct relationship. A recent study found that by reducing speed from 50 kilometres per hour to 40 kilometres per hour reduces the chance of fatal injury by more than half. And pedestrian and cyclists are our most vulnerable road users and account for 15% of total deaths on our roads. We have an opportunity here to improve safety and walkability along the Esplanade by reducing the posted speed at activity centres. Councillors, let's get this done, take a stand with me and support our most vulnerable road users, people.
Mr. Councillor O'Keefe, Mayor Seymour, have you got a question or speaking?
Can I just ask a question?
Oh, sorry, my microphone was off. Mayor Seymour?
Yeah, I just had a question because where I read the motion and where I understand the motion, it's 40 kilometres for the Esplanade. But at several points, Councillor O'Keefe, you mentioned specific areas which are already 40. So the motion and the intention is for 40 kilometres along the entirety of the Esplanade, right?
Councillor O'Keefe?
No, that's not correct. So what I'm actually asking for is for the Speed Management Committee to make that assessment. And in my mind, that means particular focus at those activities, high activity pedestrian zones.
Like we have already.
So there's currently no 40 km/h speed limit along the Esplanade. So it's currently 50.
Okay, I thought that when you get into the Torquay, when you go through those sort of speed bump areas, it is 40. Is that not the case? Okay, sorry.
No, you would think that, but no, it's actually posted
it feels
at
like
50.
it, and you sort of have to slow down because it sort of turns. Yeah, no, that makes sense. But reading your motion, the actual motion, it sort of sounds like the entirety of the Esplanade, which I would support anyway. Beach Road to the pier anyway.
Perhaps if I could ask Director Naidu if you would like to comment on your thoughts on the nodes that already exist or have been identified as part of the Esplanade master plan?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Forgot my name.
So the report that we'll bring back to council will do a traffic count collection, data collection, and also the current speed, the average speed along the Esplanade. That will inform us the stats that's needed to go into the speed limit review process. And my thinking is that a lot of those build-up areas along those precincts, like the Scarnes, Torquay, Palba precinct, and the Urangan precinct, will probably align for a 40 kilometers per hour. And when the rest of the Esplanade master plan gets rolled out, there's probably an opportunity to reduce the rest of the Esplanade to 40 kilometers at that point in time. But I can see the, even before doing the speed limit review, I have a good understanding how the process works. It will probably support 40 kilometers per hour in those business precincts. So we'll bring that report with the data collected and the assessment done. So the report will provide a bit more detail on how it's can be staged.
Thank you, Director. Mayor Seymour, just making sure you could hear that okay?
Yeah, I did. That makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks. And Councillor Gomes. Councillor Chapman?
Question to Director Naidu. So you're saying that this is actually going to come out in the master plan?
So the master plan, if you look at the master plan, I've put some extracts in that additional information that I was provided. So the master plan supports a 40 kilometers per hour, but that's subject to other infrastructure rolling out as part of the master plan outcome. So the master plan is very clear that they are looking for a 40 kilometers per hour for the entire Esplanade. But what I'm saying is the report that we'll bring is there are areas that are already built up with a narrowing and raised thresholds, so that will support a 40 kilometers per hour. So all I'm saying is it will be a staged rollout of the 40 kilometers per hour along the Esplanade as per the master plan.
So another question is so you've got staff working on this now, so if you ask for a report, you actually have to take staff off other work to bring on to do this report?
That's correct, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We will have to redirect some resources to be able to do this body of work. So there is some data to be collected. We'll have to do the review and then take it to bring a report back to council. And if council supports, then it will go to the Speed Management Committee. To answer your question, councillor, we will have to divert resources to do this body of work.
Councillor Chapman?
Mr Mayor, I'd actually like to speak against this motion.
Okay.
I do support this motion. I'm been very involved in road safety right through, so I do support this motion, but I cannot support voting for it. And the reason is, this is actually jumping the queue. We actually sit down and do a budget, and what actually happens is the staff talk to the management talk to the directors, and the directors of those departments do up a report. Things like this, talking about speed, we've got a traffic advisory committee which also handles speed. Anyone, councillor or any resident across the Fraser Coast that's got a problem with speed can actually put a request in to have it reviewed. We are already doing this work through the Esplanade Master Plan. If this motion gets up, we will have to take people off the Esplanade Master Plan that are working, our traffic engineers, take them off that to write a report that we're going to get anyway. So what it's actually going to do, this is actually slowing the master plan down. This is what you call jumping the queue, by putting it through the council, doing a motion here. What we need to do, we've got the correct channels to go through, which are the Traffic Advisory Committee. You put a council request to the Traffic Advisory Committee, and then it is looked at in those departments, and the request comes back to councillors. I feel that I do not want to take staff, I do not want to cost the community more money by another report. It's good to say that you're going to vote for a report, but when you vote for a report, it costs money, and we're already working on that. So we're going to get, it's either this, you put the master plan back a bit longer and get this report, or you get the whole lot within the master plan. So councillors, I will not be voting for this because this is jumping the queue.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Is there any other speakers for or against? Mayor Seymour?
Yeah, I'll definitely be speaking for this, and it is, I think it would be a great mistake if we said this was jumping some sort of queue, which, you know, out there, I don't think this will take a lot of work. We already, as I thought they were 40-kilometre-hour zones. You go into these ones, you go over those speed bumps, which look a bit like crossings, but aren't, and then you get to real crossings. It'd be, in most of the activity zones, it'd be very hard to go over 40 anyway. I think it makes very common sense, and I think we need to move to 40 kilometres right from Beach Road to Pier Street. And this is exactly the type of decision we as a council should be making a decision on, rather than saying there's some sort of queue, you know, in the department that we have no control over. This is a public safety issue, and it's also an issue in terms of making sure the Esplanade is people-focused and a good asset for the community.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Chapman, are you questioned?
Yeah, question to the director. It was just mentioned by the mayor that this won't cost any money to do a report, very little money. Any idea roughly how much time and that would it take to put a report like this together and put a budget, sort of just a rough estimate?
Thanks for the question, councillor. Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor. So as I said before, we need to collect the traffic data. So that data needs to feed into the review process. So collecting data, we got counters there, you know, and then the review process, and then prepare a report. I would probably estimate anything between $10,000–15,000 to do this report and bring it back to council.
Thank you, Director. Yeah, I don't think the Mayor did exactly say that, but I at least appreciate that the Director has advised that, yeah. Is there any other speakers or questions on this item? Councillor Govers?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm going to vote for this motion. Considering the amount of people who have moved to our area, the growth is just unprecedented. We have more foot traffic, cars, bikes, scooters. It's something that needs to be done sooner rather than later, I feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Govers. If there's no other speakers, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Cosgrove, are you speaking or question or?
Yeah, speaking. Thank you,
Speaking, yeah.
Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak for the motion. This particular one I was very torn about because I'd be reluctant to see certain sections slowed to 40 without the requisite infrastructure upgrades. But I wanted to commend Councillor O'Keefe for many of the motions that he's bringing, because what he's essentially trying to do is catch the Esplanade up after what is probably years of neglect in terms of infrastructure. I mean, the decision that this council made last month is a massive decision that is going to, if it happens, put pressure on the Esplanade. So, Councillor O'Keefe, forgive him for jumping the queue, but the queue was jumped when we potentially placed such a massive development outside of the node in Torquay. So we're going to need infrastructure down there, we're going to need changes down there, and they're going to have to happen quickly. So I think I was a bit 50-50 on this one, but these type of motions, Councillor O'Keefe, I believe, is bringing them forward because we're not seeing fast enough action on the Esplanade Master Plan. That can't always be the answer. Wait for the master plan, wait for the master plan, wait for the master plan. We need action down on the Esplanade. We need infrastructure. We need to support people to enjoy that space, and we're not going at a rate of knots quick enough as it is.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. Is there any other speakers? If there's no other speakers, as there was a speaker against, Councillor O'Keefe, you have a right of reply if you wish.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I just want to point out that we currently have an Esplanade Master Plan strategy, and that's used as a guiding document. So we actually don't have we're not at implementation stage. I want to thank all of my colleagues for supporting me on this. It's time for the rubber to hit the road on this. This is a very easy win for us. It will significantly improve safety down on the Esplanade. And again, I want to thank my colleagues for their support.
Thank you. For the rubber to hit the road at 40 k's. Yes. All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried 9-1. The next item is 12.2, request for consideration in the 2024-25 budget review process. This is moved by Councillor O'Keefe. Is there a seconder for this item? Councillor Byrne. Councillor O'Keefe, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Deputy Mayor. Yeah, look, I'll be brief. I believe that it's in the interest of transparency and good governance that I raise these requests in a public forum. We need to be accountable for our actions as individual councillors, and councillors need to be held to account for their actions in determining budget priorities when we get to that point. If I need to speak on all of these items, I would be happy to speak to them, but I will reserve that right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Are there any questions or speakers on the item? No?
I'll talk really quickly about, I support this. Number 4, the pump track, that has proven to be, I think, one of the most popular public spaces local government in this region has ever built. And it clearly does need more amenities. We are now constructing the nearby parking lot. We are about to very soon construct the toilet. We are constructing more benches and mature trees, as this is sort of alluding to. But I think we certainly do need to take greater work. Often we do this, we plunk something down, like the sports precinct, for example, because of the limited pool of funds, and then we realize the further work that needs to be done. So in terms of point 4, I think we do need to continue to look at the Harvey Bay pump track and how it can be improved, because it is such an extremely popular public facility, as many of us perhaps didn't predict when Councillor Wellings raised it in the room you are now in, perhaps 5 years ago. But I support all the points as well of the motion.
All right. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Any other speakers or questions on this item? Councillor Chapman, question?
Director Nadu of looking after parks Planting of trees around the pump track, is that something that would be looked at through a request?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. The team are already looking at some planting around the pump track. So there was a limited planting as part of the project. So I'm not exactly sure where they are with that, but there is certainly planting going around, and there was also planned to do some additional planting around the pump track once the first stage is rolled out and once the amenities go out. And also when the car park is completed, there may be further assessment to see if there's additional shading required in that space. So I sort of, from my perspective, it will probably take a bit of time to get some of those trees established, but that will also give us opportunity down the track to review if there's additional planting required in that area.
Okay. Another question is item 5 about the development program to audit the rectification of defects of footpaths. Have we got a system that we actually have to go across the region about defected footpaths? I have noticed where some footpaths have been ground off. Have we got a program that we already do there?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. Through you, Deputy Mayor. We have asset inspectors going around, and they do regular inspections of the footpaths across the region, and that program actually provides us the defects out on our footpath network, and then we use a prioritization process to identify or rank them, and then that goes into our program. So yeah, to answer your question, Councillor, we do have a footpath condition inspection program in place.
Item 3, we've got, we want alternative footpaths between the Esplanade and the back streets. Will this take off footpaths off the priority bike and cycle paths that we've got across our region that we're trying to fill in?
Well, thanks for the question, Councillor. That will be a matter for Council to decide. If these projects are identified, that will trickle through the budget process, and then Council will have the opportunity to make a decision. But the Esplanade Master Plan does identify some of those locations for connections. So yeah, it could be rolled out through the Master Plan process, or it could be identified as a separate projects, and that could trickle through the budget process, and it comes to Council to decide.
So just for clarification for everyone, assuming this passes, these items will be discussed at our ongoing budget meetings going forward. This doesn't mean that all of these items happen, it just means that we will be discussing them at a point in budget deliberations.
Yep, sorry.
Just, Director Naidu, ask you one more question before we get there. So if these items are all to be discussed in budgets, you'll have to also take staff to, there's talking about line marking or safety for crossovers and everything like that. Will that actually go through a traffic advisory committee, or how will that be handled?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. Through you, Deputy Mayor. I'll have to allocate resources to scope these items up to be able to be considered at the budget time. So it will probably require not a lot of time, because we'll do a higher level assessment on these items, and then scope up, and then do some cost estimate before it goes into the budget. But yeah, I'll have to allocate some resources to do this before the budget.
Okay.
Any other questions or speakers? Councillor Cosgrove.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question to the acting CEO, mainly for public clarification, but am I right in saying that all councillors, via way of an email to the CEO, have the right to ask for something to be listed for budget review via that method, and it's not necessary, although I know the reasons for putting it in a motion, that at any time we can email the CEO and say, please list this for budget consideration, and then that will happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, entirely correct. Councillor Cosgrove can come to us via an email, the app, Councillor app, via a motion and all of those matters. The way I'm interpreting this is that, Councillor O'Keefe is seeking to get some priority on these matters, and the reality is, there's the prioritisation of, for instance, which footpaths or which crossings, but then there's the broader budget discussion of how much of the overall council budget is that a priority. So it's the division of both how much do we spend on trees or footpaths or those types of things, and then which ones, and those discussions will be had as part of the budget, and we'll make sure if this motion is passed today that these specific matters are considered, as well as all the ones that come via the app or emails.
I might just add to that, in no disrespect to yourself or Councillor O'Keefe, about the use of the word priority or prioritisation. This doesn't give it any different status in being discussed as it does if Councillor Cosgrove put forward something in the app. It would be given the same treatment when we discuss it. So this doesn't get it elevates it that we're discussing it at a public meeting, but it doesn't give it a higher priority when being discussed. Yeah,
yep,
just for clarification. So, is there any other speakers or questions on this item? No. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, Mr Mayor and councillors. Councillor O'Keefe, it's I will be voting against this motion also. I said use the words last time that it was virtually jumping the queue, but there's ways of doing things, and there's ways that we could have done this without bringing it out into a public meeting and doing these things as we've got apps and everything like that. And just by even the work that's gone into these motions now, it's cost time and everything like that. And I'm one for trying to save money for the community. So I feel that we've got to deter motions that can be worked in with the officers and the systems that we work, and stop putting load on the council purse. So I won't be voting for it.
So as there has been a speaker against, Councillor O'Keefe, you have a right of reply.
Yep. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. And I appreciate questions around this, but again, I'm just asking for this to be listed for consideration at budget time. I understand that we have multiple competing priorities, and I understand that this request will go through all of those filters. I'm simply asking for it to be listed for budget consideration. You can do it in two ways, email, or you can list it at an ordinary meeting. I didn't expect I would have to speak on this. It was just simply a matter of tabling it and presenting it to the meeting. And I appreciate your support on this. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. So I'll put that matter to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? It's carried 9-1. Next item is 12.3, request to consider including a footpath study in the 2025/26 budget. Councillor Sanderson is moving this motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Byrne? Councillor Sanderson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, Mr Deputy Mayor. So, colleagues, as said, the motion speaks for itself, so I won't reread that. But I just want to speak to why I've brought this forward. As we know, everyone in this region deserves, I think, to either walk on a footpath or have a footpath in a township in which they live. Some of our smaller townships don't have footpaths. So the reason for me bringing this today, of course, some areas may want to retain the character of the areas, but others I believe don't. And I think this is a first step in actually asking council outside the active travel strategy to take a step forward in giving the areas more of a priority for new footpaths to be built and the best places for them to be situated. So colleagues, allowing this to proceed I think is a good step forward. I think if we can take this first step to allow it to be discussed in a budget process, then if we can get a report to formulate a study that allows every one of us in this room to advocate for those areas to have new footpaths in our future budgets. So I implore you to please support this motion. It allows us to then go to the next step moving forward. Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Are there any other speakers or questions on this item? Councillor Cosgrove?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. I'd like to speak in favour of the motion. I'll obviously support the listing of anything for budget consideration. I think that's a valid thing to do, but specifically to this issue, I think that as a council, we always have to have in the back of our mind the worry of the tyranny of the majority in terms of how we make decisions for capital budgets, because you might only have 3,000 people in a township, but you build a footpath there, you might get 2,500 of them walking on it. So, whilst it's easy to prioritise just for population areas, I think when it comes to footpaths, we do need to make sure we are getting out into the regions as well. I personally would like to see, in my time on council, a footpaths budget, so to speak, where we could really spend dollars not only in our main population centres, but get out into these out into these townships as well, because you can have kids riding their bike. It's already a less traffic area, so but you don't really want your young kids doing that on the road and stuff. So I could see this helping at Boonaroo, Poona, places like that where we could get real benefit to the communities out there by getting footpaths in those places. So I really commend Councillor Sanderson, and I'm supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cosgrove. I don't want to put words in Director Naidu's mouth, but I'm pretty sure he has heard and understood us. Councillor Byrne?
Yes, I'd actually like to, through you, thank you, Mr Mayor and Deputy Mayor. I'd also like to support Councillor Sanderson on this, knowing full well that some of our smaller communities, I know that Burrum Heads, Howard, Torbanley, all of these areas also suffer with our ageing population, but also too, we want active people in our community, so making it safe for those people, as Councillor Cosgrove pointed out, to walk, run, play, live in our community. We need to get these things sorted, and I believe that, and I do commend, and I will be supporting Councillor Sanderson on this as well. I think that our communities in our little townships really need to prioritise some of these things for them just as much as some of our more heavily populated areas. So I'll be voting yes for this.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Chapman?
Question to Director Naidu. Director Naidu, there's a walk and cycle path across the major parts, across Harvey Bay and across Maryborough. When this actually happened, was there consideration for these smaller towns?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor. The work and cycle strategy identified the major connections within the two town centres, and also looked at the outer areas where there was high priority. So where the usage is lower, the report didn't extend that far, because there was sufficient number of footpaths identified in high use areas, and there wasn't any benefit in going any further than that. So otherwise the study scope would just broaden, and you won't be able to narrow it down. So so that was part of that. But we do have some of the community plans that was done some years ago. That could be a starting point to look at what has been identified, and maybe using that as a starting point to prioritise the outer areas.
Okay. And well, this is going to put a significant burden on the budget, as in, well, it's up to council is the question. Do we want to spend money on footpaths, or do we want to spend money on infrastructure? And the thing about it is, where we spend the money in one town, we'll have to try and spend it in other regions. Is that how it's going to be looked at?
Councillor. Yeah, thanks for your question. Look, I mean, we will prioritise using our processes, and we'll bring those projects in the budget. So, and it'll be matter for council to decide what council considers as high priority. We'll feed in as much information through the budget documents, so council has all the information to make a decision on.
Okay, so virtually this motion virtually comes back to council to decide at the next budget if they want to do this study. So we'll have virtually a cost at the budget for it and an idea of how much it's going to cost.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Director Naidu, is there any other questions or speakers on this item? No? If not, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimous. Okay, so the next item is 13.1. Am I done that right? Yes. Page 466, request to name the park reserve at the corner of Pyalba, Burham Heads Road and Peterson Road, Craignish. Is there a mover for this recommendation? Oh, sorry. Councillor Govers is moving this one. Sorry. Seconder, Councillor Farage. Councillor Govers, do you wish to speak to this? Or no, that's all right. Is there any other speakers or questions on this item? No, I can't see any other hands. Although I'll put this to the vote then. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Okay, is there any general business, councillors? Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd actually like to ask you for general business if the council would like to accept about the Boundary Road opening.
Oh, okay. So we have to move...
I'd like to move
you'll
a motion
move the
that
motion.
I speak in general business about the Boundary Road opening.
I'll just check, do we need a seconder on that? We'll just assume that we do. Okay, so I'll second that one then. So I'll put that to the vote because I don't think we can discuss it. So all those in favour? That's carried unanimous minus Councillor Whelan.
Yep.
Okay, so then now you have to move another item. Did you move an item or you can speak to it now? I think actually has to move.
Yes, I'm assuming it would be a motion like that, that, you know, move that council, you know, acknowledge the opening of the
Boundary Road.
Boundary Road and the celebrations that were held last week.
Chloe, can you just catch those words?
So,
I'd like to move the motion that we acknowledge the opening of the Boundary Road, which was 2 weeks ago.
Yep. Okay, so Councillor Chapman's moving that council acknowledge the opening of Boundary Road. Councillor Farage, are you seconding that? Seconded by Councillor Farage. And Councillor Chapman, do you wish to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Councillors, thank you, and Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to speak on the opening of the Boundary Road. Boundary Road was a great project. It was something like about 28, 30 years in making about when that development went in. And this is a way of working with governments, is working with the federal and the state government and the council. But one of the things I'd like to say is this project had a lot of hurdles, a lot of problems that it come across as it was being constructed. And I'd just like to thank our staff that we've got in council for the way that they handled it, the way that they brought their the problems back to the council. And I know that these problems cost more money, but that's what happens is when you do infrastructure. If you try and cut corners with infrastructure, you pay big money to repair it in time to come. People do not realise that this has got a full drainage system from one end of this road, underneath the road, straight up the middle of it, and which all those streets drain into. It had very little drainage because of the slope of the site. The contractors too, also I'd like to thank them for the with the project of how the work, and then with the extras that were brought into the project, how we actually put our council engineers, and I feel our council engineers actually grew from this project, and we're very proud on the opening day. There was well over 1,000 people. There was opening with free breakfast. The mayor was there and did a speech. We had Keith Pitt was there, and Adrian Tantaro, the local state member, was also there, and spoke highly about this project. But it's not only how good the project was finished, it's how good it is for our community now for access. I was talking to a lady this morning, and she lives in a retirement village over on Doolong Road, and she said that you can come out of Doolong Road now and turn straight out on the street. That road wasn't a major road, but it was being used as a major arterial road because that's all we had. So this is catching up with our infrastructure that we needed, and we need to be looking out for where there's other congested areas and other areas that need to be improved. And we all need to work together, and we need to lobby our state and federal governments for funding to help our infrastructure, because we're one of the fastest growing communities within Queensland, and it shows that with the planning developments that are coming across our desk. So thank you, councillors, thank you the staff, thank you to the contractors, and really thank you for the government for the funding towards these projects. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Are there any other speakers to this item? Councillor Farage.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'd like to echo the sentiments of my colleague, Councillor Chapman, but I would also like to thank him for his advocacy before my time on council, but it definitely didn't go unnoticed to secure this project. I have had a lot of really good feedback from residents that, you know, it's shortened their trips to doctor's appointments and shopping centres. But I'd also like to thank the residents for their patience during this project. As my colleague mentioned, it did take some time and there were some hurdles, but everyone remained, you know, really calm and gracious throughout. I'd also like to thank the contractors. I had some really good feedback from some of the residents in my division that the contractors worked really hard to make sure that they still had access to their driveways, and even went as far as to carry their shopping, you know, inside from their car, which I thought was commendable and really good. I'd also like to thank Director Naidu and his team and everyone that was involved in the process, as well as the state and federal government for this project. It's been a real game changer for our community, and it provides such a great east-west connector to complement Boat Harbour Drive and the Esplanade. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farage. Is there any other speakers on the item? Councillor O'Keefe.
Yep, thanks, Mr Deputy Mayor, and I also want to echo those comments made by my colleagues around all of the efforts made by multiple stakeholders and multiple levels of government to get this project done. I also think that we should thank the community for their patience. It was a big project. It took many years to reach fruition. It's interesting, like we focus on how it's made this connection between east and west, but we also have connected the north and southern sides of the suburb of Koowangan, because previous to the construction of this roadway, residents would have to navigate a ditch to be able to go and visit their neighbours a couple of 100 metres away. Now they can cross at multiple pedestrian refuge crossings, signalised intersections. It's improved the walkability of the community, and it's improved connections between the east and west as well. So yeah, very commendable and worthy of talking about.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Any other speakers on this item? All good. Yes, I just echo the statements that everyone else has already said, and well done to all those involved. And yeah, we had, I was thinking before we were naming things that we commonly referred to it as Dennis's Road. So, and yeah, well done to you, Councillor Chapman, for your constant push on it. All right, so I'll put that matter to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Is there any other general business items anyone wishes to bring forward? Nope. Next is confidential is nil. Late items, it is item 16.1.1 is the organisational performance report for July. This is in supplementary, page 521. Is there anyone that wishes to move this item? Councillor Cosgrove. Is there a seconder for this item? Councillor Chapman. Does anyone wish to speak to this item or any questions? No? Okay, I'll put that matter to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. So next is item 16.1.2. Councillor Byrne has left the room already, but Councillor Sanderson, you leaving the room now? If you can just let Councillor Byrne know to just stay out. No, it's all right. Okay, so this is item 16.1.2, CTIS 024-2324 Urangan Seawall Construction, Pier Park to 150 metres east. This is in the supplementary one. Is there anyone that wishes to move this item? Councillor O'Keefe. Is there a seconder? Councillor Chapman. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? Or questions? Councillor O'Keefe.
Just briefly, I just want to thank our staff for all of their efforts to get to this point so far. We've been able to overcome some significant regulatory hurdles, and a significant amount of behind-the-scenes work goes on to be able to get these kind of approvals. So years this has taken to get to this point. So I just want to thank them for all of their hard work.
That's great. Any other speakers or questions on this item? No? All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimous from those that are here. Thank you, Devendra. Director. We'll just wait a second. And it's our last item. Thank you, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Sanderson. And our last item for today's agenda is item 16.1.3, the Auditor General's Second Interim Observation Report, 2023-24. Is there a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Farage. Second, Councillor Wheeland. Is there any speakers to this item? Or questions? No? Nice and easy. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimous. All right, there being no further business to discuss, I can close this meeting at 11:23 a.m. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.